Power is never born loud. It grows quietly, step by step, until people stop questioning it. The empire did not rise overnight. It was built through patience, smart choices, and perfect timing. At first, the world saw only success, deals closed smoothly, doors opened easily, and respect followed every move. Each one added another brick to the wall, and soon that wall looked unbreakable. From the outside, everything appeared clean, legal, and admirable. People believed this success story because they wanted to believe it. A powerful figure gives hope to some and fear to others. And both emotions protect the image. As the empire expanded, influence spread into places most people never notice. Not just businesses, but conversations, favors, and quiet promises. Meetings happened behind closed doors where no cameras were allowed. Decisions were made long before the public ever heard about them. When problems appeared, they disappeared. Just as fast. When questions were asked, answers were delayed until interest faded. Over time, this created a dangerous illusion. It made power feel permanent. It made mistakes feel impossible. It made consequences feel optional. The public image was carefully shaped. Charity work, public speeches, and calm smiles told one story, while silence covered another. Supporters saw a leader who lifted others. Critics saw someone untouchable. Both sides underestimated one thing: power attracts attention, and attention never sleeps. Every move leaves a trace. Every favor creates a witness. Every silence has a cost. What looked like loyalty was often fear. What looked like respect was sometimes just waiting. Inside the inner circle, trust slowly changed shape. Friends became cautious. Partners started protecting themselves. No one wanted to be the first to step away, but everyone felt the ground shifting. Success had grown so big that it could no longer be controlled by one voice. The empire began to move on its own, driven by habits, greed, and pride. And when power stops listening, it starts exposing itself. The biggest mistake was believing the image was stronger than the truth. The belief that money could slow time, that influence could erase memory, that silence could last forever. But history shows the same pattern again and again. Empires fall not because of one big error, but because of many small ones ignored for too long. The higher the rise, the quieter the cracks, and by the time those cracks become visible, the fall has already begun. Nothing truly dangerous arrives all at once. It slips in quietly, disguised as something small and easy to ignore. The secret did not appear as a single file or one loud accusation. It formed slowly, piece by piece, across years of ignored details. A document misplaced here, a phone call remembered there, a decision that did not sit right but was never challenged on their own. These details meant nothing. Together, they began to tell a story no one was meant to read. Someone noticed patterns where others saw coincidence, numbers that did not add up, promises that changed depending on who was listening, meetings that happened without records. At first, even the observer doubted themselves. Power makes people question their own instincts. It convinces them that what they are seeing must have a reasonable explanation. But reason breaks down when the same questions return again and again. Unanswered. The danger of secrets is not their size, but their patience. This one weeded, it moved through hands quietly, never staying in one place too long. Each person who touched it added another layer, another reason to stay silent. Fear became the glue holding everything together. Not fear of the truth, but fear of standing alone. Everyone assumed someone else would speak first. No one wanted to be the one to trigger the storm. Inside the inner circle, tension grew heavier than loyalty. Conversations changed tone. Smiles became shorter. Trust turned into performance. People began protecting themselves instead of the empire. Some erased messages, others saved copies. A few prepared exit plans just in case. When power weakens, even slightly, instincts take over. Survival replaces belief. The secret reached a point where silence was no longer safe. Keeping it hidden became more dangerous than revealing it. That is the moment when truth stops being optional. It does not knock, it pushes. And once it starts moving, it cannot be controlled by money, influence, or delay. The secret was no longer owned by one person. It belonged to time. And time always collects what it is owed. What made this secret powerful was not proof alone, but timing. It surfaced when confidence was highest and caution was lowest. When everyone believed the empire was untouchable, that belief became its weakness. Because the truth does not need force when arrogance clears the path, and once revealed, even partially, it changes everything. Conversations shift, loyalty fractures, and the idea of rest, once unthinkable, suddenly feels inevitable. The arrest did not begin with flashing lights or sudden movement. It began years earlier, in silence. While the empire continued to grow, a parallel process was unfolding in the shadows. Files were opened and closed. Names were added, then removed. Every step was careful, slow, and deliberate. This was not about speed. It was about certainty. Authorities knew that power does not fall easily, and one weak move could collapse everything they were building. So they waited. Behind closed doors, conversations changed tone. What once sounded impossible slowly became practical. Legal lines were drawn again and again. Evidence was tested. Then tested once more. Each decision had to survive pressure, influence, and time. Power pushed back quietly, using connections and favors to create doubt. But doubt only works when truth is thin. Here, truth had weight. It carried history, patterns, and consistency. And that made it harder to erase. The day the decision was finalized did not feel dramatic. There were no celebrations, no raised voices, just calm agreement. Everyone in the room understood the risk. Once the move was made, there would be no return. This was not just an arrest. It was a statement. It said that influence has limits, and silence does not last forever. Papers were signed, orders were given. The machine that had waited for years finally began to move. When the moment arrived, it felt unreal to those watching. The figure who once walked freely, surrounded by respect and distance, now stood still. Cameras captured what words could not. Shock froze expressions. Supporters struggled to process what they were seeing. Critics felt vindicated, yet cautious. No one knew what would come next. The empire that once felt untouchable now felt fragile, almost human. What made the arrest powerful was not force, but timing. It happened when confidence was at its peak, when defenses were relaxed, when everyone believed control was absolute. That belief created the opening, and in that opening, years of quiet work finally surfaced. The arrest was not revenge. It was not theater. It was the end result of patience meeting opportunity. As the world reacted, one truth became clear. This moment was never about one person alone. It was about the idea that power can delay consequences, but it cannot cancel them. The arrest marked a pause in a story that had been moving for decades, a pause where everyone was forced to look. Again, not at the image they trusted, but at the structure beneath it. And once that structure was exposed, nothing could return to how it was before. The moment the news spread, judgment moved faster than facts. Screens lit up, voices grew louder, and opinions formed before anyone asked for proof. Supporters rushed to defend, calling it a setup, a betrayal, a game played by unseen hands. Critics celebrated, saying this was overdue, that power had finally been checked. Between these two sides, the truth struggled to breathe. No one wanted to wait. Waiting felt like weakness in a world addicted to instant answers. Social media became the courtroom. Every old photo, every past quote, every public move was pulled back into the light and judged again. People who had never met him spoke with certainty. Stories were rewritten in real time. Acts once praised were now questioned. Silence was treated as guilt. Defense was treated as denial. The noise grew so loud that facts became just another voice in the crowd, easy to ignore, easy to twist. Those closest to the center felt the pressure most. Friends hesitated before speaking. Partners chose their words carefully, if they spoke at all. Some offered support that sounded loyal but safe, others disappeared completely. Fear does that. It teaches people to protect their future before they protect their past. Loyalty, once loud, became quiet, and quiet can mean many things. Meanwhile, the system moved at its own pace, untouched by emotion. Paperwork continued, procedures followed their path, while the public demanded answers. The process refused to rush. This gap created tension. People mistook patience for weakness and delay for failure, but justice, when done properly, does not perform for the crowd. It works in silence, often misunderstood, until it is complete. The hardest truth was this: public opinion does not decide guilt. It never has. History is full of moments where the crowd was wrong, both in praise and in anger. The court of opinion is driven by feeling, not evidence, and feeling changes every day. What seems obvious in the heat of the moment often looks different with time. As days passed, one thing became clear. The arrest was no longer just about law. It had become a mirror. People saw in it what they already believed about power, fairness, and control. Some saw justice, others saw danger. But few were willing to admit uncertainty, and yet uncertainty was the only honest position, because in cases like this, the loudest voices rarely hold the truth. The truth moves slowly, quietly, and without asking for approval. With time, the meaning of the arrest began to shift. What once looked like a personal downfall started to feel larger, heavier, and harder to define. This was no longer just about one name or one face. It became a symbol, a signal sent not only to those in power, but to those watching from below. It asked a simple question that made many uncomfortable. If someone this powerful can be stopped, what does that say about the system itself? Power often hides behind structure. Titles, boards, and agreements create the illusion that responsibility is spread so thin it cannot be traced. For years, that illusion worked. Decisions were framed as collective, outcomes as unavoidable. No one person was ever fully accountable. The arrest cracked that illusion. It pulled focus back to the idea that leadership still carries weight, and that weight must land somewhere. At the same time, fear quietly moved through other circles of influence. Not fear of guilt, but fear of exposure. People began reviewing old choices, old partnerships, old silences, not because they were wrong, but because they might look wrong under new light. This is how one moment reshapes many lives without ever touching them directly. How it listens closely when one of its own falls. Yet the question remained, was this justice, or was it control wearing a new face? Some believed the arrest proved fairness, others believed it proved that power simply changed hands. Both ideas carry truth. Systems are built by people, and people are never neutral. Accountability can exist beside strategy. Justice can exist beside politics. The arrest sat uncomfortably between these realities. What could not be ignored was the message sent to the future. That no image is permanent. That influence has an expiration date. That silence is not protection, only delay. Even those who disagreed with the arrest felt its weight. It forced conversation where there had been comfort. It introduced doubt where there had been certainty. And doubt is dangerous to unchecked power. In the end, the real impact was not legal. It was psychological. The idea of being untouchable cracked, and once that idea breaks, it never fully heals. The arrest did not promise fairness forever. It did not fix the system overnight. But it reminded everyone of something power tries hard to erase. Control is never absolute, and consequences do not disappear. They wait. The future did not arrive with answers. It arrived with silence. After the noise faded and the cameras moved on, what remained was uncertainty. No clear ending. No final statement that could close the story. The arrest had paused the movement of the empire, but it had not erased it. Power rarely disappears. It adapts, reshapes, and waits for the right moment to return in a different form. Behind the scenes, Pieces were already shifting. New faces stepped forward. Old names quietly stepped back. Meetings continued, just with different voices and new rules. The system, once centered around one figure, began to spread itself wider. Learning from the shock, this was not collapse. It was adjustment. And adjustment can be just as dangerous as resistance. For the public, attention slowly drifted. Another story took the headlines. Another controversy replaced this one. That is how time protects power. It teaches people to forget. But forgetting does not mean resolution. It only means delay. The questions raised by the arrest did not disappear. They settled into the background, waiting for another moment, another trigger. Those closest to the center understood this better than anyone. They knew the story was unfinished. Legal processes move forward quietly, often out of sight. Outcomes take shape slowly. What looks like an ending is often just the middle, misunderstood as closure. The arrest was a chapter break, not the final page. The most powerful ending is not a verdict, but awareness. The knowledge that no position is permanent, that every structure depends on trust, and trust can fracture. That power demands obedience, but reality does not. These truths linger longer than headlines ever will. And so the story remains open. Not because justice failed, but because history rarely ends cleanly. It leaves threads loose, lessons incomplete, and futures uncertain. The arrest changed the direction, not the destination. What comes next will not be decided in public view, but in quiet rooms, careful choices, and moments most people will never see. The silence at the end is not emptiness. It is possibility.